Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium's fourth in a series of webinars on the Prescriptive Online Supply Chain Risk and Resiliency 90-Day Action Plan tool. This survey assessment takes about 30 minutes of your leader's time to build a tailored action plan aligned to your business needs. This is the fourth in this series of webinars on supply chain risk and resiliency. And today we'll be focused on operational propensity. And as you can see here in our opening slide, we call it the kite. What is the shape of your kite? And we'll get into that in just a few minutes. With that, my name is Jim DeVries. I'm the founder of Enhance International Group. I will be the host of today's webinar. We also have with us Connor Fitchin, who will be helping us behind the scenes. Thank you, Connor. Greg will be sharing his vast expertise. He's one of the original founders of Supply Chain Risk and Resiliency. He's president of APAC's ASCM. Greg, a few words.
You bet. Thanks, Jim. Thanks for attending, folks. So we'll be talking about our passion again today, especially relating to operational propensity or risk culture. I'm the founder of the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium. We've been in business for about 12 years. We'll give you a thumbnail sketch of the consortium in a minute. I've taught SCRM at Lehigh for 10 years, still teach ERM, Enterprise Risk Management, at Villanova University in Pennsylvania here in the States. Spent 8 years with IBM as a supply chain executive consultant. I spent 30 years, perhaps like many of you, as a supply chain exec for a couple of Fortune 100s, and I've taught supply chain management at 6 different universities here in the States. And again, ended up being the president of Apex, now ASCM, in the late 90s. Back to you, Jim.
Thanks, Greg. And just a little bit about my background. For the past 30, 40 years, I've worked in a multitude of different companies. I've served as a resilient executive leader for startups to Fortune 500s. And I've developed global teams to identify, prioritize, and deliver high return on investment, sustainable improvements, generating self-funding results. My teams are been in areas from sales, supply chain, finance, reporting, business intelligence, artificial intelligence, new product introduction, field ops. Our teams have developed resilient enterprise ecosystems to accelerate digitization, innovations, supply chain risk management, leadership development, strategy, and value creation. My core belief is that success starts with the untapped potential of employees from the leadership down to the shop floor, including suppliers and customers. We live in an ecosystem. It is in developing others that we can excel in building a resilient enterprise. With that, just a brief overview of this webinar series. This is the fourth in the series of webinars. You can find all the webinars on the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium website, as well as the EIG website. And today, again, we're focusing on operational propensity. How do you operate? Some people call this culture, but how do you operate? What is your operational propensity? And coming up towards the next year, we'll be focused on how to put together a game plan in January, and then making supply chain risk and resiliency a priority in your company, giving you some helpful hints. So with that, Greg, back to you.
You bet. Thanks, Jim. We said we'd give you a thumbnail sketch. This is more or less who we are and what we do. On the right-hand side are we're growing, most of the organizations that are within the consortium. We're at 31 companies right now. That's about 1,700 supply chain risk professionals around the world. You can see we break it up into education, consulting, and software as a service pillars. These companies bring tools, techniques, methodologies, and software solutions to help us identify, assess, mitigate, and manage supply chain risks. On the left side, what we provide, kind of profile it around 5 areas. Online education, we've got 2 certificate courses. One is basic, one is geared towards services and public health care. 2, we do a lot of coaching and consulting. We lead, guide, direct, and coach companies on their journey. We bring enterprise software as a solution, especially supporting supply chain risk and resiliency with risk alerts, supply chain mapping, predictive analytics, and so forth. And then finally, we have 2 new online assessment tools. One is supply chain management online readiness. We'll talk about that in other seminars. Today, we're going to talk about the 5th bullet, which is prescriptive online supply chain risk and resiliency, called our 90-day action assessment plan, where we'll talk about maturity, risk, and especially today, we'll talk about your operational propensity. So with that, I'll turn it back to Jim.
Thanks, Greg. And a little background about the Enhanced International Group. We're a group of 50 consultants, consulting companies, and SaaS providers. And EIG serves as the master integrator to provide the access to the best and brightest companies. You can view it as a Swiss Army knife. Our team is dedicated to empowering your organization's workforce by leveraging our partnered, tenured thought leadership expertise. Our goal is to meet or exceed your expectations with customized, predictable, sustainable, repeatable 90-day self-funding programs. Just a little bit on the bicycle slide, because it does relate to the webinar here of linking strategy to execution through tactics. And the front wheel is the drive wheel, or that sets your direction, and your rear wheel is your drive wheel, I should say. And the strategy wheel is a little bit larger of these two. The 2 geared wheels are inexplicably linked and in sync, otherwise will become derailed. Developing an agile supply chain risk resiliency mindset will ensure that we are successful in our journey. In summary, a strongly linked strategy to execution ecosystem results in positive momentum for the company, its employees, customers, suppliers, and stockholders. Quoting Albert Einstein, life is like a bicycle. To keep your balance, you need to keep on moving. So with that, we'll get moving onto our agenda on what is the shape of your kite, otherwise known as operational propensity. Our agenda today is the compelling reasons to act. Why should we be making this a priority in today's world? Number 2 is operational propensity overview, definitions, tactics, and a case study. And then number 3 is our action plan program. And number 4 is the benefits of the supply chain risk and resiliency program. So to kick us off here on the compelling reasons to act, we all read it in the news. The consumer price index has increased quite a bit. It seems to be receding a bit over the last month or so, but inflation, recession is on everyone's mind, and it's more the reason why we need to look at supply chain risk and resiliency. And quoting my old mentor, Jack Welch, I was at GE for 15 years, up to 2000, when GE was the #1 company in the world and had sustained 10 or 100 quarters of growth on earnings. And it was the #1 company in the world at that time. Jack said at that time, if the rate of exchange outside your organization exceeds the rate of change inside your organization, the end is near. So as you look today, as the outside world is changing ever more, it's more and more the reasons and the compelling reasons to act. With that, Greg?
You bet. We have a few more here. This is to us what's coming down the road according to Gartner, a recent Gartner profile. They call it the triple squeeze of compounding pressures as the recession threatens. So let's just go left to right. Number one, persistent high inflation. 90% of the CEOs say inflation will be a significant factor in their region for 2022 and beyond. We would agree with Gartner. Second, scarce expensive talent. 47% of chief financial officers report it's difficult to find and hire enterprise talent. That will continue, and we wrestle with it every day as well. And third, global supply chain constraints. 48% of the CFOs believe supply chain volatility and shortages will last beyond 2022. We sadly agree with those three triple squeeze issues. So that's part of the compelling reason to understand your maturity, risk appetite, and your operational propensity. There's more. We have another one, CFOs eye shortages and delays as top risks. This comes from a good magazine, CFO Dive, Friends of the Consortium. Top five, we'll just go through the top five concerns of CFOs. Number one, supply chain disruption. Sadly enough, that's been with all of us for at least 3 years. Second is the talent shortage. This is coming from CFOs. Third, tax reform. No surprise there. CFOs are always concerned about taxes. Fourth is COVID-19 waning a bit. And then the fifth of the top five is economic volatility. So these top five, you can see, are pretty tightly aligned and knitted together going forward. So there's more. We also wanted to share with you our W recovery and the 3 R's. We published this back in April of 2020 at the outset of COVID-19 for our clients and our workshop and webinar attendees. All right, what is it? On the top in the blue boxes, our government imposed lockdowns, reopenings, lockdown again. That's government approach to handling the COVID. On the y-axis on the left is demand and supply, either in balance or out of balance. You have over demand and under supply on the top. In the green, you have supply and demand in reasonable balance. Then on the bottom left, you have under demand for a product and oversupply. And then on the x-axis on the bottom was our business response, which we called the 3 R's. And we'll just go through, give you a thumbnail sketch. As you can see, we recognize the bullwhip effect would be prevalent for some time into the future as of April 2020. We just didn't know exactly how long. In the first response area, we call it respond, you can see companies were reducing their product portfolios. They were attempting to keep up volume to support their customers and rescale their supply chain, basically surviving the lockdown. In the second area, recover, you can see companies continue to reduce their product portfolios again. They were attempting to reinvent their product lines and go after and sustain new channels, which came up in the recovery phase. And in the renew phase, where many of our companies are now based on our present sentiment and survey analysis, the bullwhip effect has diminished for certain industries, but companies are now attempting to manage excess inventory and diminishing demand. So from that point of view, we wanted to give you kind of a framework of what we saw starting in April 2020. It's getting better across multiple industries. And with that, I'll turn it back to Jim.
Great. Excellent, Greg. And again, if you have any questions, please enter them in the chat throughout the webinar. And we are on to our second section, the impetus for the 90-day supply chain risk and resiliency assessment, action plan tools. And we are here, we're lining where we're at today and what we need to do next. performing these actions in the right order to gain the maximum improvement. As we like to say, identify, assess, mitigate, and manage. And on the right side, we have an old gentleman, FM Alexander, who's actually an old Aussie or Tasmanian from Tasmania. And he was an actor and author, and he developed the Alexander technique back in the late 1800s, 1900s. And he said, he had a great quote there: people do not decide their futures, they decide their habits, and their habits decide their future. So a lot of things that we sometimes are rebranding today is sometimes may have been said once or twice in the future, in the past. So as we move forward, we'll just start looking at what was the impetus for developing this tool. Again, Greg went through it a little bit. Of course, the COVID-19 pandemic in the 2020, a lot of the challenges were outlined in Gartner's LinkedIn survey, as Greg mentioned, and many other things. And we will see many challenges in 22. And in 2020, they said why investing in supply chain resiliency pays off, which has been reinforced by the focus by governments, industry leaders, and the news networks. We see it now. Supply chain risk and resiliency is almost a name that a brand that you see on the news almost every day. The third item here is an ability to sit down with companies. We are starting to get out of the hallways, getting into those hallways again today, but that was the driver for the program. And then the staggering and uneven negative impact of pandemic and manufacturers, the bullwhip effect, driving that artificial demand and supply shocks, which we are living and breathing today. So that brought us to develop this program. And what is the 90-day action plan program focused on supply chain risk and resiliency? What we set it out to be, the get is to give you a 90-day action plan via online survey, so you could take it in your own sitting. 7 hours of investment of time would be the total number of hours of commitment from your executive leadership team to this program. But what you get is a strategy and a deployment of supply chain risk and resiliency into your company. Everything's done virtually. It's onboarding, the collaboration and coaching sessions. It goes and looks at 3 different perspectives. Where are you through the maturity model, which we covered in a previous webinar? Who are you through risk appetite, which we just covered in that's the last webinar. And now, how do you operate? Operational propensity. What is the shape of the kite, your kite? And then that all culminates into this 90-day action plan, which we'll be covering in the next webinar. Again, all you have to do is set up a person in your executive team in a area that is most important to you, a business area, a product line. We keep it small, something that's controllable, and where you're finding you need some support in supply chain risk and resiliency. So we have a designated leader. You identify the executives in that group. Those are salespeople, procurement, manufacturing, finance, some operational excellence folks, and then maybe any other folks that you need to get that rounded out view of your supply chains and logistics folks. So what do you get then are, after everyone completes the survey, is that 90-day action plan report. You'll get 5 to 8 actions tailored to your company of what you need to do next, which would align very good with your annual operating plan that you're coming up to in 2022. So this could be dovetailed into that. We offer checkpoint calls, first call to get everybody aligned, a second call, did it work? And then a third call and a pulse check, and then a closeout call. And on top of this, we provide 40 hours of consulting, coaching for you and your team. So this is the offering. And with that, we'll get into the next section, is looking at what is operational propensity, a deep dive. And again, we have another oldie but goodie guy, Mr. Peter Drucker, who liked to say culture eats strategy for breakfast. And he kind of invented the concept in the 1950s and 60s of the knowledge worker. If that sounds any familiar, we probably rebranded it 1,000 times since Drucker first coined it in the 50s and 60s, and talent scarcity. And they were having the same problems back then as we're having today, is do we have the right talent in the right place? And right now, that's one of the top issues for companies of finding talent. And with that is, we'll get right into what is the shape of your kite and starting the journey roadmap by our diagram here. And on the y-axis, we have the speed index and the stability control. And on the Y2 axis, we have agility and external focus differentiating. And as you can see, there's a diagram in the middle that looks like a kite. And so what you have on the axis are the heartbeats, and the quadrants are personas, and we'll go through and describe each one of those in a few minutes. Again, these are the axes and the focus areas for each of the dimensions of this four-sided kite, or four-sided diagram of the kite. And with that, we're going to talk more about the axis right now. Again, we're going to talk about orange, the orange area here, where you go from slow to fast. And so you're going from a bureaucratic mind persona to a startup persona. Stability and control in blue. This is blue, from efficient to collaborative. And those are going from a bureaucratic to more of a trapped organization, or a clannish organization. In the agile or agility, the purple in this right side here. And that's where you go from a weak trapped all the way up to a strong agile. And again, this is a constricted aligned organization versus a strong agile heartbeat. And then on the external focus area on the top, you move from a narrow on the left to a broad agile on the right. And here you're focused on high rate conditioned on a single focus goal. So you're very narrow focus goal versus a balanced moderate to a high changing environment. And depending on where you are in your evolution of the company, there's no right or wrong. Sometimes you have to be narrowly focused. Sometimes you want to be more broadly focused. It's all about balance. And so that gives you an idea of each of those. Now we go into the personas. And the personas, we talk about bureaucratic or hierarchical in the bottom left. And those companies are the ones that are more controlling in orientation. And then the ones over to the right, the next is more of a company that is nurturing, collaborative design. These companies tend to be more privately owned companies in general. Bureaucratic tend to be larger conglomerates in general. There's always obviously exceptions to the rule. The agile tend to be more new types of companies, post-2000 companies that are dynamic, entrepreneurial, risk-taking, looks and values innovation on a regular basis. And they're always breaking the mold, and very creative orientation. And then on the upper left, the startup company is the ones that are really looking at fast results. You know, the PE, private equity, grow fast, grow 10x, that type of companies tend to be in that startup. So those are the personas. Again, you could be a startup, agile, bureaucratic, or trapped, or maybe you could be a combination of these, as we'll see in a few minutes. So with that definition, we ask, what type of company do you feel you are in your company? And with that, I'll turn it over to Greg for a few words.
Yeah, again, there's we always like this this polling approach, because it's kind of like a horse race where we can watch the attendees and the workshop folks go back and forth. We appreciate the engagement. Again, remember, there's no right or wrong, but this is going through the survey and the tool. We attempt to demonstrate to you, your operational propensity, and we think it's important as we talk about supply chain risk and resiliency journeys. So appreciate the engagement. Looks like we got somewhat of a horse race going. Again, there's no right or wrong. All right.
Yeah.
We have to constantly let people know that this is not a test. It's an opinion to a certain extent, but it's an observation based on some quick definitions. And then if you go through the tool, we ask some pretty detailed questions to make sure that we can give you a good solid profile of your operational propensity. So thanks for engaging in the poll.
Yeah, thanks so much. And I've worked in all four of these different environments, and they all have their different strengths and weaknesses of getting things done. But it's important to know, what is that culture? So very often when you even go for a job interview, they'll ask you, have you worked in an environment like ours? And what they're really asking you, are you familiar with this? Would you enjoy working in this environment? There's no right or wrong. It's only what your experience has been and where you would feel most comfortable in excelling. With that, we'll start talking about the complexion of the shape of the kite a little bit more now that we understand the personas. And so we'll talk about, what is the shape of your kite? Do you have one tail? Do you have two tails? Do you have, is your kite skinny or fat? What does that mean? And then, and how resilient is your kite in being able to keep afloat in gusty winds? Because we're talking about resilience here. And depending on the shape of your kite and how you're managing that kite, you may be more or less resilient. That's the bottom line. And how you manage different types of things. So we call this the long pole in the tent kite, where you have one dominant persona. It could be narrow or wide. This example is a bureaucratic company or hierarchical. We like to say, maybe that's a more positive word. Some people say bureaucratic is negative. It's not. It's just who you are. It's internally focused. You run with really a controlled order and continuous improvement. Very procedurals. You have SOPs and they're actually followed. Everything's very in line. Leadership is generally very quality focused and has a long-term vision for the organization and a stable structure on a clear rules and formal policies. Generally, larger companies, conglomerate companies, when you're juggling a lot of things, tend to be this type of a shape. And it's not too uncommon of a shape for, I'll call them pre-2000 companies. The double tail is a company that may be bureaucratic, let's say, but has a startup division, or they promote startups all the time. And so they may have a set of divisions that are more on the startup versus the business that's generating the margins in the revenue for the company. Again, there's nothing wrong with having two tails. It's all about balance and understanding your strengths and weaknesses in that. And so the tightness versus the broad impacts, your operational propensity on how you're managing different situations throughout the company. The next is a double tail, as you see here. And what we see, a lot of PE companies are trying to go really, really fast. And then they may have to be bureaucratic at the same time. And there's different organizations that tend to be focused on this type. Again, you'll see this a lot in high growth companies that are out there. And then the next is a box kite, which is generally a pretty mature company. You could have a small box or a big box. A small box is maybe a startup company that's trying to balance everything and trying to be everything to everyone. That could be good or bad. They're trying to please everyone. And then the larger box is something where that's probably the nirvana for larger companies that are, you know, in the 10 billion and above, or $100 billion companies. That box is really trying to balance everything. And I think that's a very rare thing. There's probably only a few companies out there that have that. And if you stick with us, we'll give you some examples of companies that are like that. With that, again, just a reminder, there's no good or bad. Kite, embrace your shape. Don't be concerned if your company has multiple personas. That's fine. If you do it at a division level, then or a product line level, of course, the shape of the kite will be more meaningful. You may have one division that's completely different persona than another division, and that's perfectly fine. The other is make sure that your project lead understands the different personas, has a respect for that, probably has some change management skills would be helpful, and to help across the company. And of course, we all love Drucker's. Just keep in mind that, you know, culture does eat strategy for breakfast. So no matter what strategy you have out there, it's not going to sustain itself on an execution perspective if your culture, if it's not aligned to the culture of your organization. So we can say we want to be lean and fast, but if we're a hierarchical company and we say we want to drive agility into our company, it may be very, very difficult, except in pockets. And then operational propensity is essential success to the journey. And what we mean by that is understanding your operational propensity, understanding your constraints of what it drives, and how it can help you understand what you need to know in order to manage your resiliency in your company. That's the key here. With that, we have some case studies. We've had some very good success launching this program over the last few years, and some of the comments coming back is we agree with the persona and action plan. This will support the development of our yearly planning. Like I mentioned before, yearly planning is something that you definitely want to be looking at with this tool. It can help you set up your next 12 to 18 months, as well as your next 90 days. With that, we're going to go into a case study with Greg on electronics.
You bet. Thanks, Jim. Yeah, again, you've seen a couple of the comments from different industry sectors. We've gone across many sectors, and you know, to be honest, at the moment, we've not really had a hard pushback in terms of developing the computer generated graphs that we're talking about today, the personas, and the actual user feedback. So what we wanted to do is give you a real live example of an outcome from an electronics manufacturer. So we'll go through a couple of slides to give you some real world feedback. For this particular electronics organization, on the left, you'll see the supply chain risk and resiliency maturity model. Our entire book, our entire consulting arena is based around the 5 steps of our maturity model. We've gone through that. If you've been with us, we've gone through it. This organization, we ask 2 questions in the tool. One is, what is your as-is condition? Please align yourself with the snippets, the little complexion, and that icon, the red icon, is the as is condition for this electronic company. Then we ask another question. What is your to-be vision? Where would you like to go in this maturity model? And that is the black icon. And essentially, you can see that they were very focused on visibility, supply chain visibility, which is very critical, very key, and important to the supply chain risk and resiliency journey. Next, we have the risk appetite for this company. And these are the 4 perspectives. Again, if you've been with us over the year, we talk about the risk appetite. We talk about the risk perspectives, and essentially the 4 risk perspectives are the burgundy is maximizers, the blue is managers, the yellow is pragmatists, and the green are conservators. And you can see the axis, the y-axis is the risk perspective from low to high, and on the x-axis normally are things like risk tactics. So we position the organization within those 4 perspectives, and at this point in time, you can see they touch actually 2 of the 4, the pragmatists and the conservators, and they're touching just a bit the manager, which is the blue. So as Jim said, and I will reiterate, yes, you can have more than 2 perspectives within an organization. So that's where the computer generated graph positioned this electronics company. And then finally, we have their operational propensity, and which is today's focus. All right, you can see that they are an agile organization as we as the tool came up with the profile. They're agile. They were a classic single tail. You can see, and Jim gave a good definition. You can see that the farther away from the center of the graph, the stronger the propensity of that particular organization. But in this case, we more or less put them with a long pole in the tent, and that was agile. All right. So we have some more user feedback for you. This again goes with the 3 graphic outcomes. Again, you can see where they're positioned, and here's some of the threads they gave to us when we talked to them during the 90-day process that Jim profiled early. We are a small startup company. We use a lot of Excel. No harm, no foul. Our company's small and young. We're operating off Excel spreadsheets. That's okay. We're eager to increase visibility. We need to increase visibility. Our customers, they were North America centric. Our contract manufacturers are based in Asia. We're not looking past the visibility stage in the next 12 months because they are young. They're trying to build out their supply chain visibility. Next. The risk appetite feedback. Again, you can see where the tool positioned their organization. What did they say to us? We are pragmatists and conservatives. We agree. We're risk averse in making decisions about risk. We were just acquired. This is what they told us through a venture capital company. With this recent change, we expect some of our risk appetites will change. They're not sure. We want to move to a more manager culture that's balancing risk and reward. God bless them. We are reactionary. We wait to the last minute. When there's a sense of urgency, then they essentially attack the risk issue. And then finally, on their operational propensity, you'll see the graph again with the long pole in the tent, which is agile. Here's what they said. We are small, we're nimble, we have an open office atmosphere. We strive to be agile and are ready to make changes. Our data is available for everyone, so they're attempting to grow the visibility within their own organization. We are a startup, and we think we're agile, and when we have a problem, we go to solve it. So remember, there's no right or wrong, just different when you talk about risk. I think we have one more portion of the user feedback and the outcome of those three essential graphics. The outcome looked like this. They accepted, this organization agreed that they are in visibility, that they're pragmatists and conservators at the moment, and they're pretty agile. They agreed with the outcome of the tool. And then from the tool, you actually get an action plan that is geared around who you are, where you are, and how you operate. What we try to do is to give the organization a good 5 to 8 set of action items where we feel you can be successful based on who you are, where you are, and how you operate. Here was an action plan for them. Maybe identify your existing and possible risks for maybe a product line. Maybe take a small product line and go end to end and essentially map the supply chain. We don't care whether you map it manually or digitally. We really don't care, but do an exercise and essentially map a small supply chain, get everyone involved into a conference room, take a couple of hours and go from customer to supplier and all the elements in between, and essentially map out a supply chain. It's a very, very interesting and exciting and a wow factor engagement. Next, we said we might identify key suppliers from that mapping exercise. All right, and that'll come out during your 2 to 3 hour session. And you might want to calculate the Altman Z-score. What is the Altman Z-score? Whether you're familiar with it or not, it's a bankruptcy predictor, and we'll talk a little bit more about that tool when we get to the end of the session. The next action item might be secure a sponsor. Why? For 2 reasons: funding and executive cover, we call it, and appoint a supply chain risk and resiliency lead. The next action item that came out was maybe you want to begin to assess some of these identified and prioritize risks using some of the tools that we have available, some of the assessment methodologies, and again, we would share those in the report and also in the consulting. A couple more action items we gave them, and that was maybe you want to subscribe to a risk alert system and integrate that with your existing supply chain solutions. There are many companies out there now that scan the globe using the internet every 30 minutes to capture, identify, codify, and categorize risk events that might impact your supply chain. That's what we mean by risk alert systems. And then finally, I think we gave them one more. You might want to start talking about or thinking about developing what we call KRIs, key risk indicators, and maybe start building out a supply chain risk and resiliency dashboard for your supply base. All right, that's essentially the action items that the tool gave this electronics organization based on where they are, who they are, and how they operate. So with
Greg,
that, I'll turn it over to,
yeah, just before we come off of this slide, there was a question, did we cover how to put together the action plan in our talk? If they're not, can we talk a little bit about how the action plan has been developed over the years, so that we can show how did we come about this action plan, I believe is the question.
Well,
and of course the answer starts with the persona, this profile that we've come up with, and I'll leave it. Greg, you can go on from there.
Well, I'll try to answer the question. Based on the 12 years of experience and 30 years in supply chain, what we did is put together almost like an FMEA approach. We put hundreds of personas together, combinations and permutations of where you are, who you are, and how you operate. So essentially within the tool are these combinations and permutations using algorithms to essentially produce the graphs, and then based on the outcome of the graphs, collectively develop action items that are in the personas, in the tables, to essentially provide action items that have a reasonable probability of being successful. Because remember, the graphs are great. Folks basically have agreed in principle on every engagement we've had. The hard part is getting a company off the dime. That's why we put together the action item. All right. And then essentially kind of lead, guide, direct, and coach the company to essentially be successful, have a good customer experience, to be successful of getting off the dime and moving forward in a supply chain risk and resiliency journey. I don't know if I answered the question.
I think you answered it for the most part. I'll just finish it up here. And he asked, is there human operation, or does the software provide the actions? The software provides the actions. Of course, we'll validate that with the discussion with the client. But as of today, everything that we've supplied from the automated action plans, from the 88 permutations that you could come out of here, have sufficed for the customer interaction. So it's pretty automated as it is today. We always want to gain feedback to make sure, but so far so good. Knock on wood. Greg, any other thoughts?
No, that's it. I tried to answer the question, and we'd be more than willing to talk offline if we need to. But that's how we built it, and that's how it tends to operate once we produce a report, which is rather lengthy and detailed.
Yeah,
you get a McKinsey-like report. I don't want to scare you, but it's pretty long and pretty detailed, and we also provide insights associated with the industry that you are operating in. So pretty heady, pretty comprehensive report.
It's very prescriptive. It tells you exactly what to do, how to lay it out. That details out the actions in detail, what you need to do, why you need to do it, what you need to do first, what your teams need to look like, and how to execute. It's pretty robust action plan, as the playbook shows there. It's a bit thick. Generally in the order of a couple hundred pages. So with that, Greg, do you want to kick off our last section here?
Yeah, you bet. We wanted to finish out our discussion and talk a little bit about the action plan program in terms of what we ask and what you get. So we'll move on and talk a little bit about those elements. All right. Here's the ask. Here's what we ask you to do. Maybe 5 to 8 executives from your company fill out the 90 questions. They go in individually. We recommend that you have a lead. A lead is the administrator watching all the individual execs to the completion. We provide the lead person a dashboard where that person can go into the platform and kind of take a look at the progress of all the executives. That's the lead person's personal dashboard. That's what we ask, 90 questions. Could the executives be department heads? We ask from the same discipline, meaning procurement, logistics, ops, in the entire supply chain, including sales and finance. We want individuals' perception of how they perceive risk in their organization. And we like to keep it homogeneous. Like I said, take a small product line or a small division, get the department heads, get them engaged, and away we go. And then finally, we asked that the executives possibly be from the same division or product line. It doesn't always happen that way. Many folks, a lot of times our engagements are with corporate folks, at the corporate CEO level or the VP level, the executive level, but we always ask for maybe folks from the same division and or the same product line, and start small. Don't pick a product line with 6,000 stock keeping units. We would advocate keep it small. This is all new. Keep it small, and we work it from there. On the get, so that's the ask. What do you get? Well, you get a sense of where you are in the supply chain risk and resiliency maturity model, those 5 stages. That's why we like to keep it small at the moment. You also get a sense of who you are with your risk appetite. What is the risk perspective of the organization or the product line. You also get a sense of how you operate. Our focus for today, which is operational propensity, which is essentially what we call your operating culture. All right. And then you get an aligned 90-day action plan. We showed you that, to survive and thrive during COVID and beyond. Again, we want a good customer experience. We've given you we've shared with you how the action items are produced. It's all computer generated, and essentially in that report, which is rather lengthy, you learn how to identify, assess, mitigate, and manage your supply chain risks. And we kind of like to use that as knowing sooner and acting faster and than your nearest competitor. And to us, that's a strategic advantage. All right. But there's more. You get a bonus here. If your company provides 5 or more executives, they fill in the survey tool, the consortium will offer your company 1 free pass to our supply chain risk and resiliency online course. That's a $1,400 US certificate. That's the value, and you do get a certificate from the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium. All right. And so with that, we said we'd finish up with talking about some benefits that we have seen relative to a supply chain risk and resiliency program. And those benefits are these. We've seen cost reduction, and this is over our 12-year experience in this space. Remember, this is all we do. And so we've witnessed these benefits in the last 12 years. Cost reduction. If you have a robust SCR&R program, your insurance premiums can be produced in terms of 10% or more, because the insurance companies will do that, because now you're more resilient than most, and you're least risk for them. Automated workflow, we advocate that. If you do that, many of the exemplars automate the risk workflow, and that essentially is time to value. If you automate your workflow in terms of risk decision making, that accelerates time to value. Cost avoidance, folks, we've seen that. What do we mean by that? Well, an effectiveness in risk detection and assessment. If you're better than your nearest competitor, time is money in this arena. So if you can identify, assess, and mitigate a risk faster than your nearest competitor, and or be better at and more proactive at identifying, assessing, and mitigating, you can avoid costs, because you're getting better and better at risk management over time. Also, if you do those two, cost reduction, cost avoidance, you're going to improve your working capital. Many of the exemplars have a 94% cash flow forecasting accuracy. That's 13% higher than their nearest competitor. Your CFO will be very, very happy if you can identify, assess, and mitigate risks and minimize your outbound cash out of your pocket. That will free up cash, folks, anywhere from 10 to 30%. All good. Everyone's happy. Next, cash conversion cycle. We haven't talked about it, but we think it's a great metric of success, both for performance and for risk management. You can find cash conversion cycle on Wikipedia. It's inventory plus accounts receivable minus payables. And then finally, the Altman Z-score. We advocate it. We talked about it. Why do we advocate you use it? Because key supplier changeovers impact you anywhere from $1 to $3 million US if you have to change a key supplier. And what is Altman Z-score? It's a bankruptcy predictor. It has a 90% accuracy level of forecasting bankruptcy 12 to 15 months into the future, and it's free. Who wouldn't want that to take a look at the financial health of your suppliers, especially your key suppliers and your customers? It's free. You can find it on Wikipedia. So with that, our mantra is think big, start small, act fast, and we have a couple of takeaways. All right. These are our offerings again, just to give you a thumbnail sketch. We identify, assess, mitigate, and manage supply chain risks. We have education, courseware. We have supply chain readiness. That's an online tool. We talked at length today about our SCR&R action plan tool. We bring platforms that do the heavy lifting, and we also do journey consulting. So with that, any questions, any comments, just reach out to our website, my email address, or Jim's on the bottom left. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jim.
Thanks, Craig. And in closing, just to remind everyone that this is the 4th webinar in the series. The other 3 webinars can be found on the Consortium's website. The 5th webinar will be on January 17th. Your tailored supply chain risk and resiliency game plan. It's really a culmination of putting everything together of the 3 perspectives, and the action plan is what was the question today is how do we come about that actions? We'll get into those 88 personas, give you a much better idea of where that comes from. And with that, we'll close it out here. And again, thank you for joining us and taking the time to be with us today. Greg, closing comments?
You bet. Folks, I'll say this: rising inflation and a distinct possibility of a downturn going forward in the next couple of quarters. We think it's more important than ever to understand your supply chain risk maturity, your risk appetite, and especially your operating propensity, which is your culture, to do what? Survive and thrive going forward. So with that, thanks a lot for attending, and all the best.
Thank you, everyone. You have a great day. Cheers.